This is a roundtable conversation on dance, music, theatre, and cinema in Dubai. In this conversation, I'm joined by Butheina Kazim, film curator, producer, and the founder of Cinema Akil, the first independent art house cinema in the Gulf. I'm also joined by Puja Unni, dancer, radio presenter, and the artistic director and founder of Spanda, a creative art space popularly known for teaching Bharatanatyam Carnatic music in the city. I'm also joined by Gautam Goenka, making his second appearance on the show. Gautam is an actor, director, and the co-founder of The Junction, one of the most popular theaters and performing arts spaces in Dubai. In this conversation, we discuss the importance of the performing arts, the importance of theater, dance, music, cinema, movies. We talk about the origin story of Cinema Akil, The Junction, and Spanda, the evolution of art and culture in Dubai and how it shapes the art forms it presents. We talk about the challenges of opening these spaces in the city and then how they created these places from scratch and also the business and economics of starting similar spaces in the city. This is no time. If you like what you see, then do hit subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, rate 5 stars in Apple Podcasts. This project takes a lot of my time, money, and effort. It's my full-time job now. So if you'd like to see it continue, please consider making a donation on Patreon. You can buy Super Thanks on YouTube. You can join as a member on YouTube. If not through monetary channels, do consider sharing these episodes, leaving your likes and comments. All forms of engagement, they really go a long way. For other forms of love and support, you can follow this channel on Instagram or Twitter, or follow me personally.
And now, it's no time.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
I want to start with a quote by Robin Williams from the movie Dead Poets Society.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace. Remember the legend. But I'm going to change the quote slightly. So the adulterated phrase now goes, we don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race. And the human race is filled with passion. And medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, theatre, cinema, dance, music, the performing arts, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for.
Yes.
So let's start with an easy question. What do these art forms mean to you? Dance, music, cinema, theatre. What do they mean? Are they important? And if yes, why are they important?
Yeah, absolutely. They mean life to me. For me, without these art forms, without performing arts, life as I know it, as I experience it, as I want to live it, would not exist. So they are the center of my world. I really enjoy these art forms. They're a form of expressing yourself, telling your story, telling where you came from. So for me, yeah, absolutely. Center of my world.
You know, funny enough, my reference for this doesn't come from cinema. It comes from the great late writer, Joan Didion. In her book, The White Album, she starts off with a sentence that's ever ingrained in my consciousness. And she says, we tell ourselves stories in order to live, right? Yeah. And it's a very simple sentence, but it's everything in and of itself. And, you know, the critic Robert Ebert, calls cinema life itself, right? And I think those two things, or those two sentiments, are really what capture, for me at least, what cinema has come to mean, doing this work over and over again. When you start off doing this work or trying to build a community around it, trying to build even like a self-sustaining cycle, because let's get real, like we all kind of create these spaces also for us to live, right? Selfishly. Like I wanted to live in all of their shoes. I wanted to be in, I wanted to have Dead Poets Society playing, on a big screen, and maybe 2 or 3 of, people I respect or I'm interested in hanging out with are going to be in the same room. So we do all of these things because we want to be in a place where, that exists, that is happening, and you don't really understand what that means, very, very thoroughly until the practice itself has kind of run without you, and you're able to kind of like sit back. For me, it's like the back seat, and I look at people's like the back of their heads and the twitching and the turning and the movements and the, sometimes the flicker in their eyes if I catch a glimpse, that's really what tells me what cinema, can do for people. And it's everything from, time travel to representation to fear to what, Jim Jarmusch, the filmmaker, calls sheer darkness. So all of these things that, that kind of crazy, toxic, nourishing cocktail, of storytelling is what, cinema has come to represent for me. And in a way, it saved my life. And I'm happy to hear sometimes, from different spectators that it's also saved, their life somehow, in a very micro level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can relate.
For me, typically I was born into a middle-class family where education was given prime most importance. So I remember as soon as I started getting into high school, there was so much pressure from my parents to ask her to stop dancing. She needs to focus on her studies. But I've always grown up managing multiple things at a time. So even at school, I wouldn't sit inside the classroom. Even if I was sent to school, I'm mostly outside the class doing extracurriculars. And the teachers would complain every time we had a PTA. She's always outside of the class. But I think the kind of skill that it gave me was learning to multitask, learning to manage things. Now, when I teach art to my students, irrespective of if they're children or adults, I think the most important skill that I'm giving them is to be themselves. So I've heard stories of so many parents, especially the mothers. They come in and say that I've also learned dancing until when I was in 10th grade. And then I stopped. Now I don't do anything of it. So it was just expensive and unnecessary. But coming to think of it, if they're able to manage a household, if they're able to manage their children's multiple classes, it's not just dance that they do, it's not just to Spanda that they come. There are children who do multiple extracurriculars in school, outside of school, and the parents are shuttling high-fledged businesses. They manage their homes, they manage 2 children, they manage all the things that they do. If they're able to do that, I think art has somewhere helped them anchor down, and multitasking, being themselves, being able to survive through so many things. I think art and dance and music and cinema and everything plays such a huge role.
And that's something I'll reflect on as well from yesterday is hearing you talk right now is, we had an opening of a Lebanese film called The Third Rahbani, about the Rahbani brothers. And, we kind of opened, the session not realizing that this was also a moment to feel together. When you bring people together, whether it's through dance or theater or cinema or music in a space, whether it's in darkness or these lights, there is a sense of being seen, a sense of feeling together, a sense of, sometimes it's positive and it's beautiful and it's this, euphoric moment. And sometimes it's really dark, and right now, we are living at a time that can be very, very dark as well. So having that moment of congregation and these opportunities and expressed in all these different ways, whether it's through the moving image or, or through the movement of the body or, or sound, those are ways that, you also, you exhale, collectively. And I think that part is important.
It's absolutely a shared experience for the audience and for the performers. In live performing arts, you're seeing it all the time. No 2 shows are the same. There may be the same script, there may be the same performers. Even audience members might be the same, but no 2 performances are the same. The experience that goes into it, the shared experiences of the audience, that's the beauty of it. And as you say, in the times that we live in today, it's a wonderful way of telling our stories, of capturing what we're going through, but at the same time also highlighting challenges that people may not know about, bringing to people's attention what they should care about. So all of those things play into it.
I want to continue exploring the journeys you've all taken that led you to this spot and founding these spaces. Butheina, you've made the critical mistake of sitting next to me, so we're going to start with you first.
I'm going to look away for the rest of the show.
But you've sat here now, so we have to start with you. You grew up watching movies at the iconic Al Nasser cinema.
Yeah.
Eating samosas and drinking chai. And I think we all Dubai kids, so this is an experience we can all resonate with. Watching movies in a multiplex is a slightly new experience. With nachos,
I still tell my kids as we pass the Al Nasser cinema a lot, this is where this is where we came.
This is where it started from.
This is what we watched.
And we all have the shared trauma of remembering that our experience went up in flames.
Yeah.
So that's
true.
Metaphoric.
Not just Al Nasser, even Plaza Cinema and Strand. So we all have similar experiences. So you grew up watching movies there. Then you went into graphic design. Then you came back, started working in one of the largest media companies in the region that launched Nickelodeon Arabia, MTV Arabia. Also co-produced a documentary, Letters to Palestine.
So after doing so many things, wearing so many hats, what brought you back to cinema? What's the origin story of cinema, Akil?
I don't think there's one, and maybe in a few years I'll get to that point and really understand like what was the thing, because I think it was multiple things. Like I think with these stories, like it's not like this is not a How I Built This show, right? Where it's like there was this thing and there was like a linear trajectory. When you do things within the organic space and the what I call soul work, it's never one thing that leads you to this moment, of having a perfectly put together, constructed, freshly painted theater. There's a lot of mess along the way and a lot of, personal experiences that lead you to pursue this path, right? And for me, the cinema was sort of a continuity in a way of like the intersection between arts and culture and media that I've always found myself at. And it was, I was working on a TV channel at some point, and that was my first exposure into acquisition of film rights and licensing and so on. So we were buying for broadcast or free to air at the time, and it was meant for a much larger audience. It was a free to air channel on Arab satellite, which meant that the target audience was around 360 million people, right, of the region. And what I ended up doing was the flip side of that, which is a series of independent pop-up screenings, one room at a time, sometimes 30, sometimes 40, sometimes 100 if we're lucky. For about 4 years until we opened our brick and mortar space. So it really wasn't a very kind of linear, event. And being, a Dubai kid as well, like our relationship with cinema doesn't have the same sort of, I think tradition or like legacy. We have our own experience and we have our own kind of like stories and mess and like, even like olfactory memory, of these places that mostly don't exist anymore. And, we were lucky to preserve the seats from the Golden Cinema or the Plaza Cinema, like the balcony ones. But that's pretty much it, in terms of those memories, other than sharing those stories, with each other and remembering how we came across, our first film. But it really wasn't, like a formal introduction to, to cinema or the moving image or, or even cinephilia as a culture. It didn't really exist in that way. So it was pieced together, from multiple different, exposures to what that act represented, of being like at the mercy of a big screen, together and kind of trusting what is being put in front of you, and who you are at the time. And you said something about, like you never watch the same show twice, but with cinema, even though it is the same, effectively the same,
the experience changes.
The experience, but you change also,
Yeah.
So you're watching the same film that influenced you when you were 15, and Nasser Cinema is a very different experience now.
Very interestingly, I'm watching a lot of the kids movies that I grew up with my kids, with my 3 kids. And some of it I watch again and I'm going, oh my God, that was so beautiful. Some of it I'm like, my parents let me watch what?
Also, like, the culture has changed so much in terms of what
God.
you're able to get away with and what you're able to say, that it's just astounding sometimes, like the amount of violence that we were subjected to.
We watched, I kid you not, a month ago, I sat the kids down and I said, oh, there's this amazing actor, Jim Carrey. You should watch one of his... I remember enjoying Liar, Liar. Let's switch that on. Needless to say, the movie ended in 15 minutes because we were like,
Yeah, and so did he. I mean, as an actor. So. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if I answered your question, but I didn't have this like Cinema Paradiso moment where, the kid was peering through the curtains from the projector tower and like, really just was part of that life. And in a way that was freeing because the conventions around what you're able to do and how you do it and what happens in a cinema, how you build the cinema, like all of those kind of restrictions even sometimes were lifted, and we built it in one screening at a time, one community at a time, one failure at a time. So, here we are now 10 years later since we did our first screening right across the street in what is now a dance studio. And we still do the pop-up, screenings, and we do screenings all over the place because that is still the ethos. It's still like trying to go to people. And I still don't feel like we've even scratched the surface.
You often use this tagline for Cinema Akil, follow us into the dark, which you said is based on Jim Jarmusch's shared experience in the darkness. You have created a shared, intimate experience in the darkness of Cinema Akil. I think it has echoes of Al Nasser with the giant samosa you can get outside from.
That's
project.
exactly it. Thank you for noticing. But the darkness is also not just darkness of like the atmosphere or the mise en scene. It's the darkness of our souls as well, and the darkness of ideas, and the darkness of from which creativity sometimes is spawned. So it's it's a metaphor for what leads us to make films, or to watch films, or seek films, or escape into films, especially at a time where you can watch anything, right? You can capture anything, you can download anything. So there is something that is very particularly unique and also vulnerable about, subjecting yourself to the choice of a theater, or a cinema, and those choices, and the people who work behind them. There's a certain trust element, and that always has an element of darkness. It's not just euphoric. And I think one thing about doing this work in Dubai is that we're always talking about it like this positive thing, like this, it's only good, and it's only beautiful, and it's only, joyful. And sometimes, like, what we do need is confrontation with all facets of life. And I think that's what the arts do, is that confrontation.
Let's explore these choices. I have a dumb follow-up question. In fact, advance warning, I only ask dumb questions. So you've been warned, but what is art house cinema? You've said in previous interviews that you've always tried to find the definition of it, but it's been slightly elusive. But I'm assuming you have a better grasp on it than the rest of us. So what is art house cinema? How is it different from watching a movie in a multiplex?
Look, I mean, the short answer is that it's just not, created from a conventional commercial studio model, right? So it can be everything from, an independently funded, like friends and family kind of, funded production to, a Sony Pictures Classics or a, Fox Searchlight production, which is sort of like an off-circuit parallel, lineup. These lines are now really being blurred because of, productions by VODs and the streamers. They're entering into that space. The studio model is also changing. It's being challenged. So you do have a lot of films that are sort of cusp, films. Is Wes Anderson today an art house filmmaker? Arguably not, right? So, but, he started off as that. And there is a certain element of giving the kind of priority or the focus to the artistic integrity of the film and the expression and the ideas and the craft over the commercial viability. If that's the departure point, then it fits within art house. For us here in Dubai, it means everything under the sun, from films you'll never get to see again on the big screen, that really don't come back. Films that will never be seen on the big screen at all, not even again, they will just never make it to the big screen because they go straight to the, OTT platforms, or they go straight to, other mediums of showcase. And sometimes it's also, productions that are meant for the white cube. They're meant for galleries, and they're meant for very specific types of exhibition, and we kind of free them from that convention. So that's all, in a way, film that belongs to the art house space. Everything from cult to independent to, non-primarily commercial. Everything is commercial. Everything ultimately has to sustain itself, right? But it's not created to make money. That's why you have filmmakers like Bellatar, the Hungarian filmmaker that will make a 13-hour film, to which 5 people will come, and that's made for the purpose of being made, for creating and giving life. And that's, I guess, what we're preoccupied with as a space.
For the purpose of being made. You've said in a previous interview, I'm not in the business of theater and exhibition. I'm in the business of making people feel. I think this applies to all 3 of you. Hopefully by the end of this conversation, we can really explore what you're making people feel, how you're making them feel that way, and also the business aspect of it. We're going to finish the introductions first. So Pooja, you're next. You started dancing at the age of 3. You just spoke about your background as well. From there, you also wore many hats. You worked as a radio presenter at Club FM 99.6, worked as a choreographer on a Malayalam movie. You have also emceed a lot of events in the region. So what brought you back to dance and Bharatanatyam and Carnatic music? And then what are the series of events that led to the founding of Spanda?
Quite a trip down the memory lane. But I'd say I never had to come back to dancing. Dancing has always been there. So right from age 3, every typical Indian household has the story of the mother who wanted their child to learn Bharatanatyam and the child who's crying and running away from classes. That's the same story. It's the same story. The only difference that my story has is that after my 10th grade, after my 12th grade, it never stopped. usually those are the junctures where people stop dancing, where people just forget about all the extracurriculars because it's extra.
Yeah.
It
Focus
was
on your
not,
studies.
They focus on your studies. For me, the extra was life to me because it meant I can just go away from where I was studying. It gave me that breathing space to move out of the focused stress environment of studying in academics. So it always was there. So after my 12th, even when I went down to Kerala to pursue my higher studies, I still continued dancing in whatever way I could. I'd always dreamt of being a performer. Somewhere the focus changed from performing to teaching. And I'd say it played a very important role in the founding of Spanda and the space that I do. Because after learning for so many years, at some point it kind of gave me this groundedness that, okay, we need to really go back to the basics. We really need to figure out the ABCs. We really need to figure out how the A came, how the B came, how the C came, and why it came. So that kind of discovery, that kind of enthusiasm to learn, I think somewhere took the lead. And when I came back to Dubai, I was obviously wanting to work in something creative. I definitely didn't want to do a 9-to-5 job. And it just went on. But that's when I decided that, okay, in Dubai, the art coming from an authentic place, I'm talking about a South Indian art form like Bharatanatyam, where there's so much of competition, where there's so many people who are willing to spend money, but are you getting the basics, the ABCs? Are you getting that all right? Nobody cared. So for me, the ABCs was what brought me back to life. So I wanted to explore the ABCs, I wanted to give the ABCs, and I wanted to share what the beauty of the foundations really were. That's where Spanda began. Side by side, simultaneously, I got into radio. I was doing radio presentations, and it kind of took a turn for me somewhere. But even then, I had a floor to dance. When I started off Spanda back in 2018, the focus was definitely not to make money out of it, a space where I could go and dance. That was the primary objective. I had a well-paying job with me, so the rent and the electricity and all that the space would need to be paid, the bills could be paid. A small room, one teacher to take care of the classes, but a space where I could go back to and breathe was the objective. Later, COVID happened and I got laid off, and then Spanda became the breadwinner. So that's when the story really changed for me. That's where we started exploring beyond Bharatanatyam, Carnatic music, beyond Carnatic music, arts, and all the things we do now. We slowly moved into another space in Arthouse as well. And we started expanding, we started growing, the team grew, all of us grew together.
Another dumb follow-up question. I warned all of you.
I think the dumb can be avoided.
I'll be the judge of that. But you brought up the basics of Bharatanatyam, the ABC, that's what attracted you to it. And you said in an Instagram post that many people come up to you and they say the basics of Bharatanatyam seem boring to them. But you've said that's often the most interesting part. And then you've said in a separate post, yes, they may dance even beautifully without knowing the hows and whys. But it's an opportunity for us to gently guide them into the stories, the roots, the history and culture that lie beneath every movement. Because when we teach dance, we're not only shaping performers, we're shaping the way they see the world. So can I ask you to give us a quick teaser into the basics, the ABCs of Bharatanatyam? Why is it such an interesting art form?
Most of the Bharatanatyam classes, I wouldn't say all, I would say most of the Bharatanatyam classes go ahead with repetitions. We have a certain set of basics that need to be covered a certain way for your foundations to be strong. So most of us, at least in our generation, I'm in my 30s. So most of our dance classes were like, you go into a class and it was very predictable what comes next. We had to practice the basics a certain way, and there were certain repetitions and certain rounds, almost like going to a gym. Like, you can somewhere predict what's going to happen today. And for me, I see children, younger children who have so many options to get distracted. So for me, the focus is to keep them engaged in a class, not just physically, but also mentally. So I have to do the basics that I do. I have to also ensure that I'm creative enough to not help them calculate what's coming next, so that I keep their mind in the class. So that for me is very interesting. So every time I walk into a class, I may be teaching the same things, the same old tattadavu, nattadavu, all of the same things. But how do I make it different for them? How do I make it non-predictable for them?
Yeah, it's such a rich, layered dance form. It's almost like learning a new language in itself. Okay. I'm going to give a quick recap to everyone what we spoke about in the previous conversation. I want to build from the journey you provided. You started theater in high school, in modern high school.
Gems Modern Academy these days.
The OGs know as a modern high school.
Yes, the OGs do.
You worked in some productions with Kevin Oliver. This is a name I think might be familiar to a lot of GEM students. And then when you were, I think, 11th or 12th grade, had a conversation with the career counselor. She said, you should consider filmmaking. Your first reaction was, I come from a business family. My father hears this. He's going to shoot me first, then come looking for you.
That's true.
But somehow she convinced your mother to put you in theater. So you got your first role of Rodrigo in Shakespeare's Othello. Hit the ground running from there. Got to AUD, found out there's no theater scene. Complained to your first director, Shankar. And he said, why don't you start it? And that's where the seeds were planted of that you can actually build a theater scene, not just take part in it. So let's follow on from there. What brought you to theater? What took you away from the claws of business and brought you to theater? And then what's the origin story of the Junction?
I'm not sure there were any clause to take me away from business of... I just didn't want to get into the old trading business that my dad was doing. That was not my cup of tea. And theater for me was a way to express myself. For each of us, our art forms are such that we saw them as an expression of who we are and the stories that we wanted to tell. So when I started doing this, there was no grandeur plan of let's build a space, let's open up a theater. It was literally a very selfish. I want to perform, right? I want to be able to tell the stories I want to tell. I want to direct the shows that I want to direct, and that's how it started off. And over time, one thing led to another. All the craziness, as Butheina has also said, that happens in the background led me to say, we are lacking a space here in Dubai. Spaces that were open with the word community in them were not really community. There were no publicly provided spaces for us to perform in. And having done theater in multiple other cities, work took me to different parts of the world. And I did theater there for the time that I stayed in those places. I found Dubai to be one of the most expensive places to be in the business, if you must, of putting up theater.
They were charging like 10,000 dirhams per night, right?
Yeah,
These commercial
it's
venues.
Crazy. Spaces were renting.
That's
How does a community group afford 10,000 dirhams a night? So 3 nights minimum performance. And that's a basic minimum, 3 nights. 30,000 dirhams even before you've actually come and said, let's get the script, let's start learning a line. How do you put that up? And so somewhere in one of these post-show parties, we kind of went, so I'm a teetotaler. Other people had a few. And someone went, you know what you should do? You should open up a space. I was like, okay, talk more. I'm sober, let's talk about this. And that's how, long story short, that's how Junction came about. And when it opened up, the idea was to build a space for the community to allow stories from the UAE, which are very unique stories. They're different from the stories we tell in India. They're different from the stories we tell in the US, in Europe. UAE has its own set of stories to tell. We're a community of, a very diverse community of people who live together harmoniously in this wonderful country. And we have our stories. So where do we tell these stories? Where does the platform come from? And that's where the Junction was born.
This was explicit in everyone's origin story. We all Dubai kids. Higher college?
Dubai National.
Dubai National, our own.
I don't know how much you know about it, but...
Wait till you find out my school. But our own, Modern High, another our own. And not surprised, our own always wins the numbers game, but never wins anything else, unfortunately. But as someone who's grown up in Dubai and has watched Dubai grow up as well, and as someone who's not just watched the evolution of art and culture, but also caused the evolution of art and culture. You just spoke about the unique stories that Dubai has to offer. So let's explore that. What has it been like to watch the evolution of art and culture over the last few decades? As an additional prompt, are you sick and tired of people coming up to you and saying, oh, I don't know, Dubai has a theater scene, has a cinema scene. Oh, there's nothing to do, feels fake and artificial.
There's a theater here?
There's a theater. If you are sick and tired of it, help me right now in creating a love letter for all those people who are one Google search away from finding these wonderful worlds. What is the state of art and culture in Dubai? And then what was it like to watch it unfold over the last few decades?
Look, as somebody that partakes in, in a constant cycle of like self-flagellation, doing what I do, there is something masochistic about opening an art house cinema in a city like this. and I guess, what you respectively do in your spaces. I do get frustrated by it, but at the same time, I understand it. Because Dubai still doesn't lead with that. Like as much as we know, because we're in it, we're in the game and we know each other and we have found our people, it does not outwardly place itself as, a city of that kind of value for culture and cultural experiences, and I think it's a conveyor belt city, as much as I'm a child of the city through and through. I grew up near the Iranian hospital, went to school here, we talked all about the textures of the different cinemas that I, frequented and other places, we saw it come to life. And that's why I think it's our role as well to be very realistic and almost critical, about the things that really, get lost in the mix. There is now a sense, at least in terms of the diversity of the city, that's becoming a very big part of the language around how the city talks about itself. And I think that's incredibly important because when we first started our work, a lot of the work was around that, is around, looking at the diversity as a departure point, as a gift. And it's not just a nice marketing, number of 200 plus nationalities living in harmony, right? It's like, really, what does that mean? What kind of people does it create? What kind of memories do we have? What kind of flavors have we experienced? And beyond the sort of superficial or consumerist element of that, how is that integrated into even what is Dubai culture like, right? Not the entity, Dubai culture itself. What kind of people does it generate? And also the diversity of that experience, because, going to middle class, private school educated, kids that end up doing the, XYZ kind of business careers or real estate or whatever your family's into is a very different experience than somebody that grew up in a, lower income bracket in the city and still spent their entire life here. And I think that part is still we don't reckon with it as much, and we're still, and there aren't a lot of avenues to do it. And the other side of that is, so I understand. I still understand why, the curiosity is sometimes not there, because it also doesn't try to attract people that are looking for the arts and culture spaces. And then, I think post-COVID, though, there was, and I don't know if you felt it in your own spaces, but we certainly felt post-COVID, there was a new generation of people, that came with their, whether it was facilitated by the Golden Visa program and all these programs that allowed people to, really consider Dubai as a base. I think, we had a lot more curio and a lot more diversity in terms of the people, the type of profiles. Before we would dream of having a script writer that comes here or, a fiction writer. Nobody's here unless they're running away from something or trying to hide to write the rest of their script. Or transiting somewhere, or their aunt lives here. That's why they have to come and visit, right? So now you're actually seeing that. I think those people are still struggling to find what is their space. And I think, we try to create those moments of community, but we're still, a long way to go in terms of really creating that fabric, beyond the checklist of things you should check out. I'm very, very, very proud, of where we are now. I'm very proud of institutions like the Junction I'm learning about. And I'm so amazed, to discover ones that maybe I didn't hear about, or didn't know about, being somebody that's in the space, and to see all these different attempts actually bear fruit, to see them continue. And I always get asked this question in interviews, what's next? I'm in a place like this, there's no what's next. It's keeping it running is what's next,
Yeah.
Keeping the doors open, being able to upgrade our ACs, that's what's next, As much as that sounds unambitious and there's always other projects and other things, but this is the foundation. You can't create a revolution, without the ship itself running, and that's I think the big part of how it's different.
Because you're shaping the audience and the consumer as well. There is no standard way of doing it. And in theater, I see it. I don't know if you guys see it in your fields as well. People come in with expectations of standard. This how theater happens back home where I'm from. Dubai is different. The consumers are different. This worked in, and the shortest way to fail that I found with when I opened up the Junction 10 plus years ago was to say, oh, this works in Liverpool, it'll probably work over here. No, it's not. It may be successful there. Very different things will be successful over here. So the evolution's been, it's been rapid. There is no set blueprint for it. It's going places. So absolutely, from a theatre evolution perspective, no theatre groups existed. I mean, if you go back 15 years, if you talk about English-speaking theatre, there were 3 groups, a total of 3 groups, 2 or 3 groups putting up combined between them 5 productions a year, maybe 6 at max. You went out to other language groups. There was 1 Hindi-speaking group, maybe 1 Arabic theatre group, putting up total of 1 production between 2 years. That was what theatre was. And in the middle of that, you want to open up a space that focuses on local talent rather than importing talent. And that's where, I completely agree with Butheina. Dubai's been telling the story of, look, come to us. We've got Chicago coming from abroad. We've got Les Miserables coming from London. We've got the Motley productions from India coming over to put up something. Great. These things are beautiful. They're wonderful and people should experience them. But then what about our stories? What about things coming out of Dubai? And we're not so good at telling that story of what's coming out of Dubai, what's homegrown. And homegrown is going to be messy. Day one, it's not going to turn into Les Miserables. It's not going to turn into The Lion King on day one. On day one, it's going to be messy. It's going to be dirty. It's going to feel like, what was this? But you got to give it time. And when you allow it to breathe, when you allow people to learn from their mistakes, when they hear from the audience that worked, that did not work, they're going to start improving. When they start seeing competition, they're going to start improving. But for competition to exist, it's got to be an easy, low barrier to entry for people to come in and perform and not feel like they had to put half their life savings in ensuring a play went up or a performance went up. Some of the most expensive places in the world, the amount of money that we pay on applications to just put up a play, to just rent a space, to just be able to get in on stage without an audience and just say hello on stage. It's expensive. So how do we make it easier for people? How do we inculcate that at the early career level, at the kids level, where they're learning this in school and they're not thinking about, okay, let's move to XYZ places in the world because there's no future here. That's changing. That's definitely changing. Has it gotten there? No. But I can see it'll get there in the next couple of years. The growth is exponential. Every few years, the leaps feel exponential. So yeah, absolutely.
The one thing you made me think of is that we're on the receiving end of a larger strategy as well, right? Like everything else in this city. So the moment, and I, go back to the change in legislation, right, of enabling people to stay here and artist, visas and cultural visas, all these things. Like these are not just about being able to be here, right? It's about then the mentality is shifting from transience, or temporality to like, oh, okay, I'm going to invest here. And this work that we all do is an investment of your soul, right? So, and what that means is that, this work anywhere else in different contexts is also bolstered by community that shares, this belief of investment into, a place or a culture or a space or a community, But if here, you're surrounded by people trying to like worry about, their next gig or their next job or their next, visa renewal, or am I gonna, get into school here? And like you're constantly surrounded by people who are trying to make, their lives run, and not really sure, like a certain sense of precarity. That makes it hard for people to ask people really to spend that time and give that, that extra effort to put a play together. Like I spend a lot of time in different, Arab cities as well, and, different contexts where, where these spaces, whether it's theater or film and so on, and the way that things are made, a lot of it is through the love of the craft, right? So you have people that are just like showing up, like they'll just show up to put something up. It'll help you to, to set up your stage lights. They'll help you put something together. And so what the Junction has done, and I'm sure your center as well, in your own, context, is really like the gravity, of the scale of being able to build community is so much harder because you're fighting against that, sense of like precarity and everybody in their own zone or everybody in their own problem. Whereas in other places, the barrier to entry financially, but also psychologically, is very low. People have time. People have sense of existing or security.
And also the barrier to entry culturally. They've grown up seeing performing arts, seeing dance, seeing cinema, not mainstream but independent cinema. They've grown up seeing theatre in and right out of school. Over here, that's coming in now. So we'll see the effects of it coming up. But spaces didn't exist. So what are you seeing? You're going and seeing the big Broadway shows. Those are nice once in a blue moon, but you want to see the scrappy things that young teens, young adults put up. You want to go see production houses experimenting with a story, and then see how the audience reacts to it. To Butheina's point, you get these writers who are visiting who now stay a little longer, who can run workshops. Last year, the Junction ran a director's program because one of the things we started discovering is, we got quite a few actors over here in the city. Directors are few and far. So who's going to captain these ships? Who's going to sail with it? So we kind of took in a director's program and we could run a 10-month-long director's program, bringing in 8 new directors to come and just learn the craft. Because where are they going to go to learn it? They go out, it becomes transient. They go out, they stay out. They're like, listen, great, I'm getting work in London, I'm going to stay there. Getting work in Mumbai, I'm just going to stay there. So where are you going to go?
For me, I think primarily taking in from everything that both Gautam and Butheina have put in, there's a sense of sometimes, like for Bharatanatyam, the OG place is Chennai. You need to be in Chennai to pursue Bharatanatyam seriously. Why not in Dubai? Why not in Dubai, and why not from a young age? Why can't Dubai be a hub for Indian culture? Why can't you learn authentic art from any other place? So for me, it really meant not everybody could afford the time to go to Chennai and learn. As a child, say 6 or 7 years of age, how affordable or how feasible is it for a parent to travel to Chennai with a child to just learn the art form authentically? And why do you have to wait until a certain age, until when the child is independent, to travel and do it themselves? What are you doing with all the young, fresh minds? Why not create a space where they can learn the form in its most authentic self while they're young? Why can't we train the brain and the mind and the creativity when they're very, very young, when they have a fresh slate and time at hand? So that's where it began. And at 16 or at 18, let's presume the child just decides that I'm not going to dance anymore and I'm going to focus on something else. Have they really lost out on their time is the real question. Yes, art is expensive. Yes, putting up a play, putting up a dance production, it is expensive. It involves money. But so is education. So is education. What guarantee do you have that a child goes into a business school and he won't drop out from there? What guarantee do you have that the child has passed out of a business school and they will land up in a certain job?
There are studies right here.
Yeah. We have so many stories of people learning in IITs and then going into an MBA and then just doing something entirely different. So yes, there was a point or a generation that focused on education because the background was entirely different. I think now we have a background who has focused on education. They've done their thing and they've also understood that art is of value. To slow down is of value. To take time off is of value. And like Butheina said, COVID somewhere has taught us all how to deal with uncertainty, how to deal with ourselves sitting inside a room in silence and just being there, being in the now.
And exploring these creative sides to yourself. I think COVID did that quite a bit on a positive as well. People went, okay, why haven't I, gone and caught that independent movie which I've been thinking about catching up? Why haven't I gone and learned an art form? Why haven't I invested in myself? And people started taking that a lot more seriously. To your point, parents nowadays, we're seeing a lot more parents coming to us and saying, yeah, I'm open to letting my child go to film school. I'm open to letting my child go into, because, again, coming from very traditional societies, there were traditional professions that people wanted their kids to get into. And then a second tier, and then arts came into the third tier, right? This is not a career you get into, right? Now it's, in the last 10 years, I think the Junction has written well over 100 plus college recommendation letters, kids who've worked with us backstage, on stage. Parents are more willing to tell kids, yeah, go learn the art form. So definitely.
And parents are also willing to risk it.
Yes,
in the
absolutely.
sense, it's okay if the child does not pursue arts because they know that beyond being a performer, beyond being a singer, there are other careers. Like if you were to learn dance, You could be a dance photographer. You could be a dance critic. There could be so many things that you explore, not just being a performer. Like I said, I was aspiring to become a performer. I never dreamt I would be a teacher. At some point, the interest shifted. I don't enjoy performances as much now, but I love going into a class full of kids and just giving them what I have in my head fresh today. So that's where I feel the change has happened.
And I think in Dubai we get that added responsibility of being kind of the custodians of feeding the non-converted. Like we're not singing to the choir. Sometimes we are, right? There's a percentage of our audience that's always going to be the cinephiles that already know like every film this director has made or follows
Come
theater.
to every show that you announce.
Every show they're there, But then the majority are curio, right? People who are kind of like finding out like what does this mean?
There's a
and I think
cinema
that
here?
is amazing. Yeah, but like what that can mean in terms of, let's say, your audience is, I find it a lot more interesting when I have, a realtor or a doctor or a surgeon or, or whatever, an actuary, in the audience watching our films than a cinephile, because what you can do to influence the way they think about, the world or the future or what matters or what doesn't matter or hierarchy or history, through film or through all of our different mediums is so much more valuable, because ultimately art is what shapes us, right? It shapes our memories, our colors, our language, our ideas about the world, our frames of reference, how our values are even like translated through the things that we read and we touch and we pursue, and the films that we have ingrained in our memory, right? And I think that's the responsibility, but also the pleasure, of being able to do that for so many people. Because to me, if an architect walks into the space, and watches a film and changes their idea about perhaps, what the city of a future can look like, through a sci-fi film from Nigeria, that's way more interesting, than, okay, like, we're now going to talk about how the sound recording was done, and that's always cool. I like to see that, dedicated cinephile. But I think that added layer in a city like this that's really concerned about the future and is at the epicenter of the changing world order, I think is way more, way more interesting and way more consequential even. Because what we do is not just like arts, it's not just tangential. It is, life itself. And that doesn't just mean like how we feel or, all the kind of the soft skills. It's really like what makes us us. And in a city that's talking about, at the forefront of AI and futurism and all these ideas, how can art be integrated into that? How can our different forms really give us as a human species, the added value of what ideas we're going to put forward when everybody else's job is going to be done by a machine? I think those things are incredibly important, and I don't think yet, from a strategy perspective, they have been enmeshed. The other thing that I also really think about a lot is what is the specificity of what we do here in the Dubai context, right? Like, what is it that's something that is very Dubaian that you can get here? What I mean by that is, in the past, when we grew up, it was always about like getting you the best, world-class conveniences, facilities, art forms, sports, etc. We had, rugby and Waitrose and whatever, that was like the standard. And I think people don't come here for that anymore. You get that. That's always good to have, but I think what we have an edge to offer is what Dubai is, right? Which is basically a smorgasbord of the global South, Southwest Asia, North Africa, Central Asia as well now to a large degree, in our populations and communities and art forms and, food and practices and, and mannerisms as well, that we should be leading with. It shouldn't be like, oh my God, I discovered this thing, It shouldn't be, this is
That should
changing.
be front and center.
It should be front and center. And, like the dance that you offer should be part of the mainstream, where ballet was the mainstream. And I think that is also changing. We're still in the very early stages of it, but I think there is also a sense of like, I think self kind of celebration and reflexiveness about the populations that really represent, this place and what makes it unique. You come to Dubai, you want to drink chai, and chai should be our drink, and we should celebrate it. And I think that's changing now, And Dubai chocolate was like kind of a, the Labubu metaphor for the city,
When you take up the mantle of pioneering an art form or being the prime movers for a particular art form in the region, is it also important to take up the mantle of educating an audience or spoon-feeding them? Puja, you've mentioned something similar in an Instagram post. You were talking about your teaching methods, and you said, should I spoon-feed the student or allow them to discover? Would the child's mind lose focus and wander away? Or are they determined enough to seek? Are they ready to walk the path, or do they still need a hand to hold? What is their learning style? Do they understand by example, or do they understand the essence and grasp the idea? I want to take this teaching philosophy, apply it to a broader audience in Dubai. Is it important to educate an audience, spoon-feed them because you're bringing something new in the region, or do you think that's sacrilege to what you're presenting? Present the art form as it is. The onus is on the audience to educate themselves.
I'll go first on this, please. It's something that I've been waiting to speak
Passionate
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the art form that I teach, Bharatanatyam, has quite a difficult language. So a layman may not probably understand and absorb everything when they come in. And it's not something that's scarce here. So when you talk about your fields, it's scarce. The availability is quite less in that sense. Here, there are n number of dance teachers, n number of dance schools, n number of Bharatanatyam providers per se. For me, the biggest challenge I used to face initially was when we had our first show, how many people would come and watch? Because it is Bharatanatyam. The moment you say it's Bharatanatyam, the first response is, oh, that's so boring. Like, it's so long. I mean, it's nice to see the child all dressed up, but how long can I sit and watch? It's going to be 10 minutes long. It's going to be 15 minutes long. And I'm not talking about 10 and 15 minutes. I'm talking about an hour and a half long performance. So I remember there were so many people who said that when we were having our first show, that who's going to come and sit and watch Bharatanatyam for a good hour and a half? Really? Like, we don't understand anything. Our first show had 500 people.
Wow.
And today, we run a show every second month. And each of our show averages a 500 audience. We fill rooms. Some of our shows even have clocked 1,500 guests. But for me, particularly, what's interesting is most of the mothers have some sense of what is going on stage. But can a layman who has zero background with Bharatanatyam, who has zero idea of what's going on, what is this art form, can they sit inside a room without looking at their phones? Is one of the biggest challenges that I find. And I enjoy it, mostly when the children perform. When I see the fathers watching the show fully without taking their phones out, it kind of gives me the sense of satisfaction. It kind of makes me feel so good. And then after our shows, mostly it's the dads who are more keen. So they come back and ask, okay, Puja, what can we do next? How should we take this forward? Do you want me to do this? Please tell me what I need to do. And the satisfaction that brings is very, very different. So in terms of a performance perspective, this is one side of the story. The second side of the story is, yes, we have n number of dance schools. Yes, we have n number of Bharatanatyam teachers, but we also function in an industry which is highly unorganized. So they're not used to having a system in place. So you can't have a class on Saturdays 10 to 12 a.m. and expect me to come on all 4 Saturdays of the month. I have something to go, so can you cut that fee? Do you do that in school? Do you do that in school? So if you're willing to, you also pay the transportation fees of the vacation months in school. So how can you expect that out of a dance class? How can you not expect to come to a scheduled class? And we have parents who come and ask, oh, this is so unreal. This is just a dance class. And we're finding the way to just remove the just. To have, this is a dance class. This is not just a dance class. How can you see the form more seriously?
No, you're absolutely right. Look, I think it's a little bit of both. So I don't prescribe to one or the other. You have to educate the audience to some extent. And at the same time, you have to be able to let them discover themselves. So it's a little bit of both. Hearing Puja, we've got an academy arm that teaches theatre. So we teach to kids and adults similar, very similar problems. People come in on day one. And I see this a little more, and I'll say it because I'm from South Asia. I see it a little more in South Asians. Will come in first, and first day my kid, why doesn't he have the most lines? Why does she not have the most lines in the play?
Yeah.
They're not the lead actor. Like, hold on, we're teaching theatre here. And there are parents that will come in and count lines. They're like, my child has 103 lines and the next child had
102.
106.
Yeah, that's a problem.
How come?
Yeah, how could you?
Like, hold on there. So there is an element of education in this. So you really hit a nerve with me because we're facing fairly similar challenges on the education side. But also if we just take the performing arts on a theatre level, there are theatre purists who come and say, no, theatre has to be this way. And then others will come and say, no, there has to be that way. Listen, we are here. So my role is to curate the calendar, to try and give a little bit of flavor to different audience bases, because there are different audience types over here. We've got a large base of audiences that want to watch very mainstream kind of the Agatha Christie's, the Shakespeare's, if you must, the Neil Simons of the world. They want to watch that sort of play. There'll be others who want to watch very original, authentic Dubai-based stories. And there's a third set of audience that wants to experience theatre from different parts of the world. So French theatre, Hindi theatre, Italian theatre, show us theatre that's not in English. And yet a fourth kind which just enjoys everything. So what do we give them? How do we curate the calendar? How do we whet that appetite? Our programming kind of depends on that. So when we program, I'm very conscious that I always say with a lot of my competition over here in Dubai, they will do a 95-5 scheduling, which is 95% of the content that they'll schedule will be imported, come from outside of UAE, and about 5% maybe on a higher side might be UAE-based content. I reverse that. So 95% of the stuff that we schedule and curate is by UAE for UAE. 5% we bring over things from different parts of the world that, again, they're not artists who have made it, who are the top of their game right now. They're the best there is. They are artists who are creating noise, who are creating the right buzz, who are on the journey, who are doing well, and their shows deserve to be seen. And it's usually their first step. So Dubai becomes their first step. So a few years ago, I'm really proud of this story. Somewhere in our first or second year, I think third year maximum, we had a young artist who had come out of Pakistan who was starting to make a lot of waves. He had done Coke Studio Pakistan, and he came in here, and his first show was in Dubai was Ali Sethi, and Junction was his first stop to do his first few shows. His next show after that in Dubai was Coca-Cola Arena. Okay. The other shows, we had bubbling under at that point. Amit Tandon, the comedian who is now very well known, when he had first come to Dubai, Junction was his first stop. Do a room of 180, 150 people. How does it go? Now again, filling up arenas, So we're really proud of that fact that people kind of start off, and I see that they use us as that jumping point to get to the bigger point. And we don't profess that we are, you have to be, your show will be the best of it. This will be your pinnacle. No, we are a step on your route. But what we're happy with is those curations of the content help our audience understand, here's a different art form. Here's a great art form. Here's how storytelling could happen. Here's how theatre could happen. Here's how spoken word could happen.
I think a big part of our educational kind of trajectory is still yet to be delivered on. It's like a kind of a pain point for me, because as much as, I really believe it's important for us to, not only cultivate the conversations around cinema, which is something we do, it's also like, how can we become, a place where you could learn about whether it's criticism, whether it's about, is it our role to play, there's no film schools in Dubai, for example, right? So is that something we should do? Is it not what we should do? And I think the thing about our, several spaces is that because of the lack of ecosystem that feeds into the work, that you do, is you end up wearing a lot of different hats, and you have to play a lot of different routes. And a big challenge for us internally, educating ourselves, is how to make that decision about what to take on and what not to take on. What is our responsibility? What's not our responsibility? And one thing that we, a big part of our, kind of philosophy has been, the sort of anti-red carpet. is we do have a lot of, especially when it comes to like, whether it's Bollywood or Mollywood, like we have a lot of massive, productions that come through here. They get a lot of their big releases here. The celebrities either live here or come through here, and, they get their fair share of the stardom. And, our role as parallel spaces or alternative spaces is to give, room and space and credence, to the films and the actors and the actresses and the celebrities, the non-celebrities, and the creators and the writers and so on, that still haven't had their time in the sun, and I think that's a big part of the education as well. It's like what Puja rightfully said, is removing the just, that's a big part of our role, is saying, this is going to be not only treated importantly, it's going to be treated as importantly as everything else. And a big part of our journey has been to also educate people about the importance of cinema from the global south. Giving that its respect, its importance, its exhibition time. For example, our third best performing film of the year so far has been Payal Kapadia's All We Imagine Is Light. And the film had released in Dubai, very, very limited release. And what typically happens with a film like this, and this is the film that got her into, the Cannes jury, and it was like a big deal. Before that, she had her documentary, and it was at the Sharjah Film Platform. So, now she's had this success. Somebody picks it up in the region, which is often not the case as well. So there's a distributor that comes and picks it up in the region. The multiplexes, give it the worst possible slots. It's like, 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Like, who's going to watch it?
It's doomed to fail.
It's doomed to, it's rigged, So obviously, like, she's not involved in the film at all. Like, in the release here, because like nobody's even reaching out to her and like making it to ask you the question, And we're like, you know what? Okay, you've shown it. It's not going to be a premiere at Cinema Akil. We don't care. We're going to give it a nice 3-week, release.
And people really came to
and people came, it was like, it was not because of, we're doing anything different. We're just giving the film its rightful place.
Yeah.
And that is a big part of our education. It's not just even like the fundamentals of cinema and storytelling. It's like how to reprioritize, the ladder of what you think of as important or worthy of respect,
Basic respect. Basic respect
to the creators, basic respect to, to even the art forms that are represented. And the audience. Yeah. Who is there, who's waiting for their film to come home, And we did a lot of that with Arab cinema, with Iranian cinema, so it's cinema of our region. Yes, we do show, your Dead Poet Society. Yes, we do show your cult classics, and Studio Ghibli is a big part of our slate, but it's also like recalibrating.
You have to curate. This is back to the point, Butheina. We got to curate the various tastes within the audience. People will come out, they don't have the same taste. They're not going to like everything. But if you have to offer a little slice of everything, and especially the things that are not being offered, the things that they are not seeing when they go to a multiplex, and they're not seeing when they go to a mall and walk into a cinema and see 15 shows of whatever's going on with an A-list Hollywood actor.
100%. And if I get, a film student or, an amateur filmmaker walking into the space and getting their inspiration from a, Nadine Lebaki or Yusuf Shaheen or Anurag Kashyap, I'd rather have that as a reference point and as an inspiration than to just do what any art house in the world does, which is not really our space. It's not really our edge. So everything we did, even the way we designed the cinema, was sort of like a defiance in a way to how things should be, and you do have people that will say like, oh, like in cinema, we don't do this, or like, this is not, people are talking all the time. I'm like, yeah, the culture here is like that, the culture here, people go together, and they want to eat and drink and they want to discuss after the film, and, and we should, to a certain degree, it's always a negotiation, right? Like, how much do you allow certain things to happen because it's culture, and how much do you stay true to the context that you're in. And I think sometimes we have these like, colonizations of conventions of SOPs that we've inherited that govern the way that these forms are, presented, that we need to also like rethink.
I'll tell you, there was a couple of instances this happened, and my answer to it. So, people came to us. Theatre has a traditional way of doing theatre when you're in a certain part of the world and other parts of the world. And we started breaking some of those conventions, small things like how curtain calls would happen. We would stand up and talk to the audience at the end of it. The director would come and take a bow. That never happens anywhere else in the world. Why would the director be seen? Why wouldn't the director be seen? The director's done work. They worked in part of this. Why wouldn't we acknowledge their role? It's never done in where I'm from. Yeah. This is Dubai. This is UAE. We do things a little differently. And we've kind of curated our audience that way. So now 10, 15, 20, 25 years down the line, you're starting to see people are expecting and they like it. They're like, listen, we want to know the stories of these people. We want to know what happened behind the scenes. We like what we see in Dubai. And in many cases, it works better than when I watched it in XYZ place. That acknowledgement I found myself chasing quite a bit, by the way. I don't know about you guys.
Even for me, this has been something similar. So like I said, sometimes we're asked, you're just a dance class. How do we shift from the just to why Spanda? One part is, yes, the academy. Some people find us too strict and too many systems in place and too many orders to be followed. But when they come to our show, they know why. They know the why of why we say it's not just a dance class. So I think it's something that one balance, and I think one feeds into the other. The performance feeds into why the academy works a certain way, and the academy feeds into why a performance is of a certain standard. How is it that someone who has zero exposure to Bharatanatyam comes and sits through an hour and a half without looking at their phone? And it's a culture that we're slowly building. People don't resist coming to our shows anymore because they know it starts on time, it finishes on time, which is not a usual in Bharatanatyam space.
Not a usual, let's just put it in Dubai.
In Dubai, and especially with Bharatanatyam, shows start 2-3 hours later than scheduled time. Whereas our show starts on time.
Oh, really?
It finishes on time. And that's something that people are so amazed about. And I feel it's a basic. So that's a basic system, right? That's something basic, that someone pulls out their time and they come in at 5 o'clock. It's our role to make sure that this show starts at 5 and ends at a scheduled time.
So, a very funny story, because the first time I was invited to an Aragnatham for someone, not out of Spanda, they were a different institute here in UAE. It started about 2 hours late and I arrived on time.
Rookie mistake.
I arrived. It was my first performance and I arrived on time. They were like, yeah, just a few more minutes. Yeah. Have some tea.
He's new. He doesn't know how it happens around here.
He's like, that's definitely not Spanda. That's definitely not Spanda.
I want to explore this even further. This is very interesting. You brought the role of the curator. You brought giving space to movies. What is the function of a space, of a cinema, of a theater, of, let's say, a classroom? Are you meant to be objective? Are you meant to show anything that deserves to be shown? Or do you also take on the role of a moderator or a curator? George Carlin had said, every comedian needs to find out where the line's drawn and then cross it deliberately. Do you have to apply a filter to all the content that's coming your way and make a decision on whether it deserves to be shown? Or is it a neutral, are you a broker for content?
No.
There's no such thing as neutrality. My opinion.
I agree. I agree 100%. There's no such thing as neutrality. I think there is definitely certain lines. Look, we are living in a certain culture. There are things that are acceptable and there are things that are not acceptable.
Beyond what's allowed in the country, like it doesn't violate any...
I think beyond that, I try and curate from a perspective of, we are a medium, we're a platform, we're a medium to help our audience and help our performers. But at the same time, I think there is something to be said for curation of what we would like, what stories we would like to be associated with. What type of theater would we like to be associated with? That was not the case, I'll be very honest, that was not the case 10 years ago when we started, because at that point we were a new space. We had this wonderfully built theater, this white elephant that we needed to get out to people. So that time we were like, calendars open, come and tell us, book us, rent us, take. Over the years, we've reached a point, touch wood, where we are now able to say no. We're not pressed to say yes. So now it becomes a little more, hey, this is what I think my audience will enjoy. And at the same time, I have to be very careful. This is not what Gautam enjoys all the time. Because if I start putting that up, I'm again not being honest, truthful, and doing a disservice to my own consumers. So take in various voices, understand what's working, what's not working. But yes, there are some things I've walked away from, I've said no to. And I at the moment, as where I'm standing, as of this recording, I would say yes, I'd continue to do that. There are things, yes and no.
Dicey, right? Because then you don't want to create the same cycle of where initially you also felt like there was a barrier to entry in
True.
theater. Now these new...
And so you have to surround yourself with voices and people who will be honest with you. And that's difficult. That's very difficult. Especially as you start becoming popular and successful. You guys have experienced it. People will come and tell you what they think you need to hear, and it kind of feeds into that same loop. And if you don't watch yourself, it's a slippery slope.
Look, I jumped on this very quickly because I really this is something I've developed the confidence to jump on it. It took a bit of time. Like in the beginning, we wanted to be accepted by everyone. We wanted to feel legitimate. We wanted to feel like, oh yeah, like this is a serious institution. We were looking at much more established references in the region, and we felt small, as we started, and we still like to remain small and humble and, independent. But I think there's a certain sense of now knowing, what we're about and really digging our heels in and, and saying, what, there is a part of it that is a trust relationship, right? When people walk into your space or coming to Cinema Akil, over time, we've built a reputation. So part of our duty as well is to govern that reputation with a lot of TLC. And that sometimes means not taking certain things on because it's not good for us. Maybe it doesn't work for our team. Maybe, I don't have the capacity to take it on. So, that's one level of it. In terms of what I think is worthy of presentation or showcase and so on, there's obviously an element of, of editorial, control that will come with you as an individual making a decision. There are other conventions that, and parameters that will govern ultimately what comes up on screen, whether the film is available, whether it's licensing, whether you can afford it, whether it has subtitles, whether it's digitized, and all of these things are real things because they also are, when we talk about, for example, classics, right? It's something we would love to be much more diverse in our classics presentation. The only film that's not like a Western, classic or English language classic, or English or French or German is at the moment Mandabi by Ousmane Sembene from Senegal. We would like it to be a lot more diverse, but we do have, for the most part, a great challenge in terms of availability of digitized and, restored classics from around the world. We have shown, in different selections and programs, but not as much as we would like to kind of put our money where our mouth is. But there is an element because that's my philosophy. That's something that I really believe in. And, when I hire and I work with collaborators and so on, we also have a shared belief in that. Does that mean it represents everybody's view? Does it mean that,
Can it be viewed
an
as
art
biased?
house... Sorry?
Can it be viewed as biased?
It is biased.
Okay.
It is biased because it's us as a group making a decision. What is our responsibility, and I agree with Gautam, is that you do have to, first of all, take a step back and see if you're kind of being myopic. And the second, diversifying who you work with and who you collaborate with. Whether it's partners that will give you insight as to how you can do things and what you should try. And second, and I guess foremost, maybe that's, even more important, is your team. To really have people on your team that will push back, that will present different views, that will, maybe even have a more of a commercial hat on. That took us a long time to realize. For the longest time, it was no, we want to show this film, even if 2 people will come. Now it's okay, where do we draw the line? Maybe do one screening, and then find other ways of presenting this film. So it's always this balancing game, and you never really get, nobody's ever going to be super happy. Not everybody's going to be happy with what you do. And I think chasing that happiness is a futile exercise. It's chasing the mission itself that becomes, a lot more paramount and important. And, you have to really protect it, and really, really, really know what you're about. Because if you know what you're about, you're going to be a lot more consistent and a lot more clear. And somebody told me this, and I think, it applies in all aspects of life. It's don't seek perfection or success, seek alignment. And if you aligned, then across the board, you're not going to have those conflicts of maybe I'm not, being, I'm not an MKD, or I'm not this, cinema. I'm a cinema here in Dubai with these people.
It took us a while to get there. It took us a while, just as you say, it resonates so well that we were chasing what we thought theater should be like. Oh, we're small. We're not. Oh, we're community in Dubai. We're not. How does this compare to professional stuff happening? It took us a while to get okay with who we were, to accept our own identity and say, this is who we are. This is how we're doing stuff. It works for us. It works for our audience, and it works for this city. And it's different than what your definition is, and that's fine. But we can always still have respectful, collaborative conversations and do things together.
And there's always going to be haters, right?
There's always going to be
like
always
someone,
still
and in a way, it's a compliment now. Like I used to think of it as like, oh my god, like I did this. Like we would make silly mistakes because we were a small team. Like we would, like put the wrong, the not updated log line of a film, for example, in our newsletter. And we would get like this nasty email from somebody who's like a retired artistic director, of a film festival that's like living, here just, on permanent
How
retirement.
dare you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like, nothing about cinema, la la la,
Blasphemy,
like you're,
yeah.
charlatans. And I'm like, this is part of the learning. Like you either want to be a part of it and support it and like, jump on, because it's really not sexy work,
Yeah.
at the end of the day,
Yeah, it's
So
behind the
come.
scenes what happens.
Exactly. Come help us. Like if you
Yeah.
really want to make it better, come and help
Come
us. Be a part of this. Our doors are open. But if you just want to be like, using a certain standard, looking like down your nose at, what we're trying to do, this is an independent effort. You know what I mean?
remember the first time we put up a full-length original play. So putting up, 10 minutes, half an hour original work is all right, but a full length, an hour and a half of somebody writing, a UAE-based writer, putting out their work, it's difficult to sell. People don't know. There's no reference point. Who do I come for? Is it the artist? Is it the writer? You got nothing to go on. And people came back and the play was fairly decent. I remember people came back and many people went, that was not great theater. This and I said, hold on, let's take a big step back here. Are you realizing that this is the first time, or a very early first time, where local writers have written something? People have taken 4 months to put it up. Was it the best piece of work? No. Was it the worst piece of work? No. But they've started off, and we got to appreciate that effort and allow them to grow from there. Those same writers today are churning out amazing content. But if they had been stopped back then, they'd listened to the haters.
And also, these people are mostly moonlighting, right, as the writers, and
They
doing it
are.
on their own time.
Now
Like
the visas have come now.
Yeah.
Because earlier, most of them are, and most of them still are moonlighting. They're business owners, they are pilots, they are architects, they are teachers, they are students. They are doing this
That's
in the
insane.
evening.
You know what I mean? That's the thing that pisses me off the most is like people who like come to you and tell you how certain things should be done come from contexts where you can apply for a grant and you can just live as an artist, Maybe not like, in a mansion.
But still, you can
be
survive.
fine. You pay your bills, you can do whatever. Like these people are doing it out of pure passion. Like
Pure passion.
And this is the stuff that doesn't get covered about Dubai. And this is what makes me really angry, is that the fact that you mentioned, like, the number of teachers that are here that are abundant, like that are here, that, you have people like that are doing all this work that never get like any kind of coverage or any kind of story. Like I remember I took a course, like one, post-COVID identity crisis, I did an acting course with a Syrian, like a really, really famous Syrian actor who his name is Faiz Kozak, and he's like a, proper like theater, but also like soap operas, actor. And it was, primarily Syrian students, and they were all like, one of them was in pharmaceuticals. One guy, I remember in my working group, was a waiter at, I forgot the name of the restaurant downtown Dubai, and their hours were like, they would open till like 3 a.m. So he would finish his shift at 3 a.m. He would flip the mat, on the table, the paper mat, and do the assignment for the next day on that mat and come to class the next day, not slept, to kind of just learn. And it's just hopes of being, having like some proximity to this actor, to learning something, to maybe breaking out. This is stuff that's happening here in Dubai. But nobody really knows about it. It's happening in like, a meeting room in the Radisson, on Sheikh Zayed Road or some like random obscure place. Those pockets is really like, they've been done like a sincere like injustice, in terms of telling a larger story.
In people's living rooms. I mean, there have been, workshops that are done in people's living rooms, in their backyards, wherever somebody can offer space. So one of the biggest challenges with theatre, especially when we are now running so much of a schedule, week in, day out, week in, week out. I mean, we are sitting on the set of a live play that's going to open in the evening. Where do we rehearse is the biggest question. And the answer to that is wherever you can. And literally, I go and tell people, listen, I'm one of the owners of this space. I don't get the space to rehearse. Nobody around the world is rehearsing on the actual theatre stage until a couple of days. If you're lucky, maybe a week before the play. You are getting the space, you are checking in, unless you are at the highest level of professional, this play is going to open in this Broadway theater, you're not getting the space. So find a space and rehearse. And people are doing it, because do we add to the cost of the production by renting out another space for rehearsals? Do we wing it where we can? You've seen this around Sarkar Avenue. When the winter season is here, there are people rehearsing everywhere.
Outside.
Outside.
In our cafe.
In your cafe is we've kind of adopted it and said that's our cafe as well, because my actors are sitting
and
there
we
all
love
the time.
it. We love it because we really are like we see ourselves as part of this community. Like ultimately, like this is how it should function, and we should design around that. I'm curious about something you said earlier. You said, why wouldn't Dubai be the capital? And was that something like you faced in the beginning, like the pressure that you're not as good as Chennai, or like not as legit?
Not about pressure, but I feel the norm has been, so when I've grown up, it's been like you learn Bharatanatyam, and after a certain point, someone tells you that, okay, you're done with Bharatanatyam, now you can do Kuchipudi also, and then you can do Mohiniyattam also. And this is the usual for everyone. And I thought it was okay. So I thought I've mastered 3 major art forms, and I've been sitting like, okay, it's all done. And that's when I discovered that, okay, we need to go back to the foundations to figure something out. And I realized that nobody ever finishes Bharatanatyam. Nobody ever finishes Kuchipudi. Nobody ever finishes Mohiniyattam. And the one challenge one question that I faced most was, your academy only has Bharatanatyam. You don't do Kuchipudi. My daughter has finished Bharatanatyam and now she needs to move into Kuchipudi. How do you sustain in where you have so many people offering all 3 art forms and also other art forms, and your child goes on stage, wins youth festivals after youth festivals. You get termed as an all-rounder. So the one big question that we face is, what if my child enjoys another art form? You can learn it, but not simultaneously. You need to master the language of one art form. And as you learn it, as you discover the form, you will realize whether you really enjoy it or not. And this does not happen over a trial class. This does not happen over 3 months. This does not probably even happen over 3 or 4 years. It takes time.
Let's talk about intentionality. Let's assume I'm creating a space of my own. It could be a theater, creative art space. It could be a cinema. And you guys are conducting a workshop. And you're basically showing me, let's imagine Junction, Spanda, or Cinema Akil, these giant paintings on the wall. And you're pointing out every single thing you've thought about or been intentional about. It could be something as small as, let's say, the color of the paint on the walls, the number of seats, the layout of the space, the color of the seat cushions, the music you hear when you come in. I want to know, how do I start creating a space? I don't even know what I need to think about. So how do you describe these spaces? And next time when I visit this spot, I'm aware of 15 other things I never thought about.
When I created the space, I was coming out of, what do I need if, as a performer over here, as an audience member over here, what do I need? What is a must-have for me? What is a nice-to-have? And then I made that list before I actually started designing or going out to a fit-out contractor, but started going, here is my must-have. These are non-negotiables. Soundproofing is non-negotiable. I need seating at a certain level. So if somebody who's 6 foot tall comes and sits in front of me, I don't lose sight lines. I need certain type of wings. I need a certain type of stage. Those are things, I think, as you start doing your art form, you realize what is important in your art form and you try and build that into your space. So you need to have that I need to have, and here's a nice to have.
And then the things that you live with.
Yeah, because you will have to live with things. I mean, because then comes the time, resources, cost kind of business aside of, yes, exactly. The BOQ came. I was expecting 1 less 0 at the end.
Story of every beautiful cultural space that has all of these, wonderful aspirations. At the end of the day, you become a contractor. Yes. And you have to be a really good contractor. Like, that's a lesson that, I love. Like, I love contracting work. I love dealing with, like, the site and the nasty, like, phase of pulling cables and all that stuff. Because it's a process, right? But, like, it is grueling work, and it's not something like for a hopeful to kind of go into with naivete, like we did. And what you see for Cinema Akil is very different than what we had set out to do. So this is like 4 different designs, 4 contractors, 4 architects later that we ended up with this space, and a lot of it was based on a pop-up that we did in the space that was supposed to be only a 3-month thing that we then learned collected insights from that we then built around. So we reverse engineered in a way what we had initially set out to do. So if you look at our first renderings or the first versions or even the location of the warehouse, it was going to be a whole other exercise, and I think we learned bottom up like we did with everything else. What is important, what is like the primary thing, what is the nice to have, and what's the stuff that was just there and we kind of like worked with it, we like reupholstered it.
Name 3 things in cinema, Akil, that you've thought about that people don't notice often.
I mean, they notice everything because everything is like very obvious, but the wall that we have in the bathroom. So when you go to the bathroom in Cinema Akil, there's this wall on the right side before you go into the individual toilets that's like a collage, of different printed matter. And that was part of the original pop-up that we did in 2017. And it was like the box office. And it was built by like, I look at that wall with so much adoration because it was literally like one night at maybe 11 p.m. we started like, gluing, and it was like Maida, that we started like using for the wheat pasting of this wall. And it was, we had, people who are now like really established, artists or designers or chefs or, people whose careers like really took off. They were just kind of like hanging around El Sarkar at the time and just like doing random things and, oh, do you want to do our social media? Like here's, 500 dirhams. And like, it was that kind of very organic place. And obviously they believed in what we did because, they cared about cinema and they gave their time. And that was a magical time because it was like really built by labor and, creative like input and vision, of these individuals. So that wall is sort of like a piece, an artwork, by all these people. And I can't name some of them because now they're like, they're in a completely different industry. Like they're killing it. They're in Michelin star guides, so I'm really, really proud of that. And it's also a collection of printed matter that I collected in my entire kind of pursuit of this journey. So I was like going to, art houses all over the world. Anywhere, any city I would go to, I would try to find, the art house or the independent cinema and get something from there. So I had this box, that I gave them when we started pasting. Then I'm like, can we make something from this? So that's one. The 2 is the similar thing with the posters and everything that you see on the wall. It's a collection from, my personal collection or donations from artists that, had these pieces. We have this beautiful tapestry from Iraq that somebody bought as like an antique piece. We have, the only like remaining, tote bag of a magazine called Bidoon, which was an amazing arts and culture criticism magazine from the region that's no longer, in circulation. So yeah, like that's a labor of love. And obviously I mentioned the chairs that are, my pride and joy. People sit on them, they still like them, but they're part of the Plaza Cinema, the Golden Cinema.
For Spanda, it's the floor. I've been very particular and intentional that we need a ground floor. It can't be on the first floor. It can't be on a mezzanine floor, even if it's a parking below that. So I know it would have made the economics a lot more easier had we just decided to compromise on the floor part.
What's the difference if it's a ground floor?
I can tap.
Okay.
I can tap to my heart's content. They get the right sounds, the right feedback when they tap. When we go onto a first floor, the neighbors need to be bothered, and then there's always a disturbance. So the ground floor was one thing that I was very, very intentional about. Second, I think people still don't know, we have the mirror on the side of the classroom, not in front where the students can see. So that's, I think, a question that some people ask and some people don't. I just don't want a distraction for the child to be looking at the mirror. So whenever they need to be corrected, they'll be turning to the mirror and dancing. So that's another thing. Third, I'm sure a lot of people have noticed this, the fragrance of Spanda. So we have a particular fragrance at Spanda, and we're very, very particular about how Spanda smells.
Oh.
So it has that perfect South Indian charm, the plants, each element on the decor is thought about. It's put in place with so much of love and intention.
A lot of people don't know this. We have one of the largest, because it's stored away, it's not in sight, on purpose. We have one of the largest collections of theatre scripts that the city probably has. Their scripts I've been collecting over the last 25 years.
It's like the Dead Sea Scrolls. You're collecting yeah.
So what people don't know, on this side where the audience sits, below it is hollow. We call it the Junction caves. So there's an entrance to the caves.
Oh, you're giving away secrets. There'll be a break-in like tonight.
Yeah, so the caves have all the scripts are in there. And so it literally shows that happen at the Junction, shows that don't happen at the Junction. Almost every single theatre group that is doing a printed or a known script generally will come to the Junction, will sit and will talk especially me, to just kind of go, we're thinking of doing this. This is the kind of genre I want to do. What can you suggest me? And so that is part of our kind of curation, offering help to the community, suggestions, because each director has their own style. You got to suggest something.
How do you organize it?
It's in there, and it's organized. It's a lot in my head. It's organized. We've got an Excel that organizes it, but in terms of what the script's about and all that, so that mainly I don't let anybody touch it and get near it because we started losing scripts after some time.
What's the code on the wall? Just asking for a friend.
See me afterwards. The second thing is we are what people may not realize is, again, so we've got neighbors. We've got a neighbor who is a record studio. We've got, of course, Arthouse Cinema. We've got a art space on this side. We're soundproofed fairly well. We used to have for the longest time a chocolate factory that was next to us. That is now a Pilates studio. And we're soundproofed well enough that things don't bleed in. That took a lot of time, effort to figure out where the sound is traveling. When you're standing on stage, there is an echo point. There is a point where you stand, which I can show you after this interview, where if you speak from, your voice will just naturally reverberate well. The third is the artwork on the walls that is done. So every few years, I will upgrade the artwork. This one's not been upgraded for the last 4 years. Was done by a then 17, 18-year-old girl in Kolkata. Again, a bubbling under artist who would just paint, and we got this entire mural done by her, where we were telling the journey of not just theatre internationally, but telling the journey of theatre in the UAE. So that's quite an interesting one for me.
Let's also cover the business and economics of starting these spaces. The problem is there's no guidebook for starting these spaces. You guys are the prime movers. It's like a black box. It's a mystery. So I want to make it easier for future founders to start similar spaces so that the ecosystem in Dubai can get richer. We're running out of time, so I'm going to cap the answers 60 to 90 seconds max. But what I'm trying to get is, what is the economics of it? So what are the operating costs, the fixed costs of starting these spaces? What are the different revenue streams? How do you decide how to price the classes? And then how do you make these decisions that might be at a conflict of something might help you pay the bills or keep the lights on longer, but might have a conflict with what you stand for?
Shalaj, you're giving away our secret sauce here.
Yeah.
But this will help future founders.
Well,
we want 5 cinema kills, right?
Look, so here's what I'll get into. I think for all three of us, we're creative people. I maybe I'm speaking out of turn. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I was never the numbers person for the Junction. But I always advocate having someone who is well removed from the business, who looks at it from a pure numbers perspective and helps you understand those numbers and tells you. So I always describe my role to my finance person's role as my job is to fly and his job is to ground me. And we somehow meet in the middle, and that kind of grounds the space. I think it's very important to get your costs in place, understand what those costs are, budget for them, be realistic about what your expectations are, and then really go out there and try and monetize it. Because if you enter in it saying, I'm not going to make money, it's not supposed to make money, guess what? You're really not going to make money, and you're going to be even further back. So it's better to say, we need to be in the green, and then here are the costs, and here's how I'm going to come into the green. I don't think any of us run spaces with the idea that we're going to be millionaires one day and this is what's going to make it. I think we run it from I wouldn't mind the millionaire bit.
I'm saving up for that Palm House, okay?
Yeah. Guess what? Property prices are rising.
With my 50 dirham chai.
So
that's
you
what you
gotta
need to do to get to Palm? Start a cinema? I didn't know. The wrong business.
So you gotta be realistic about costs, I think, and then be very clear about how you list them. And my advice is have someone who understands numbers better than you, can run circles around you.
For me, I've been an all out and out dreamer, and certain things are non-negotiable for me. With regards to the cost part, my husband, he's my partner in crime. I think I'm the criminal and he's the partner part. But
like that.
He's the one who does the costs. I don't honestly interfere with that area because then it kind of limits my creativity. And I've just left it fully upon him. There are certain points, like you said, where we don't meet. And we try to hold hands together. There are certain points when it does not happen. When it does not happen, we just don't take it up. until we have clarity, until he's sure he can manage the cost, and until I'm sure my creative part is not compromised or touched. Because ultimately, I don't want something that I don't want to be doing.
Look, I mean, it took a while for me to kind of really acknowledge that separation, of turf is really necessary, and it's something that will be, a big part of the sustainability of the place. I was kind of trying to do everything, and sometimes that's what you do. It's a typical kind of founder problem, is that you try to do everything, right? You try to be the sort of hopeless romantic and the poetry, and then also try to be the contractor and the accountant and the ruthlessly kind of conservative cost cutter, right? And it doesn't work. It doesn't work for you to do. You're never going to be realistic. Like, you're never going to be completely like hands off. I think as a founder, you're always going to have some sort of like involvement, insight. But you also have to realize that at some point, and as life changes as well with your journey, the thing that people don't talk about with these institutions is that founders also evolve with their own lives, right? Things change, their demands change, circumstances change. You have families, you have whatever. So all of these things that do happen means that you have, when I used to have like the luxury of spending like the entire day and night, at the cinema, I don't have that anymore, right? So now, is it, and it's also, I shouldn't be, at this point. So you have to also at some point realize, okay, where do I, allocate and delegate and get somebody who's way better than me, and now, we've restructured, we've constantly tried different models. COVID was obviously a test for everyone, in different ways when it comes to the economics of doing this. But I think a certain kind of literacy, I wish, I was a Deloitte or, PwC consultant before this, so that I could just quickly wrap
Dream
up
job for
these,
a cinema founder.
It would have made it a lot easier, But there's also an element, like I mentioned, you have to know what you're about in order to make those decisions and stay true to what you're about. So you're, the things that you're not willing to compromise, you have to get really clear on those, and you have to fight for them. Because sometimes you will have to do the things that you don't know, like, is this going to make money? Is this going to work? But it is big, in line with the kind of cinema we're saying we are. So showing a Osman Sambeni film, in the middle of a classics, where it's competing with Before Sunrise and Before Sunset, and it's doing a very low occupancy, is still, something I'm going to fight for, because otherwise what's our promise? And, talking a big talk about showing cinema of, a much broader offering. So you kind of always have to play this negotiation role. And you really have to know how things work, and also adapt, because the industry changes, right? So for us, the industry changed tremendously in terms of, how, whether it's distribution, kind of models have worked, whether it's fees, whether it's, and a lot of our work is also connected internationally. It's influenced by the market, the global market. So I'm at, every major festival throughout the year. I travel a lot, because otherwise, first of all, I'm not seeing the films when they're coming out, and we don't have the relationships with the distributors that are still sitting in, France or Italy or Germany, and holding the rights to films about our region, So you have to so that has to be built in. Those are not like hidden costs, And then the other part is the cost of labor, that is also something, I was very conservative about in the beginning, trying to keep the team very lean. But sometimes you got to spend money to make money, right? So you had to grow and, realize, we do need to, and a person who will bring you money is going to cost.
It's going to cost you money. I think you got to be able to pivot, right? You got to be able to pivot as a founder. You got to be able to say, yeah, that was not the idea that I was thinking of, but now the reality is, I'm like, okay, I can move. I can offer this. So, for example, we were never going to be in the business of education of theater. But then when the rubber hit the road, we kind of went, hey, we're getting a lot of demand for this. People want to know from us. And it just makes sense for us, now that we provide a space, we have an in-house theater group, why are we not also educating? And that became a whole revenue stream on its own, which we had not accounted for. But it also became a cost stream, because we had to hire teachers, we had to hire all those things.
And the other thing I will say also, because this is creative entrepreneurship, in this context, you do have to, it's a neoliberal capitalistic kind of, economic system that we exist in, right? And because we don't have the public funding or different types of funding models that exist in other contexts, or even CSR funding, or individual donors like it exists in, in North America, for example, because of tax breaks. So we don't have all of these, like we're not benefactors of this. So you're basically trying to make, the bottom line work within what you have, right? So you really are operating in many ways like a business, right? And you have to really diversify in ways and do things that other cinemas, or other types of similar models won't have to do. They don't have to rack their brain thinking about, I'm going to do this cinema on a on a rooftop and like do all these things for this brand or whatever, because they don't really have to make that extra money, or they don't really want to. That's the thing. Like you also have to decide: is your goal to break even, and self-sustain, or is your goal to actually have this be, a breadwinner and something that's viable, sustainable, and can actually feed your family?
I was going to say that my husband, like I said, he manages the admin and the finance part of it, but he's also a risk taker. Sometimes not all your projects are break even. Not all of it would fit into this income versus expenses bracket. But sometimes you really need to take the risk. And maybe a financially non-viable project would bring you more opportunities and bring more light and revenue into your business, not through this stream, but through another stream. So that's something that we've extensively worked on.
So the way I look at it, any sort of project that comes, any sort of play that comes, any production that comes, I look at it from three eyes. Number one, is this going to make us money? Okay, if it's not, that's okay. Is this going to get us fame, notoriety? Is it going to get us more eyeballs in the junction? Or three, am I doing this because A, I'm passionate about it, or B, I'm going to learn something from it? So if it doesn't hit one of those three buckets, then why am I doing it?
At the start of the project, it might not hit all three buckets. But at the end of it, I think a large part of it also is based on how willing are you to just jump into the water and see if you're able to swim. You may drown, but then...
Yeah, not every production we do makes money. In fact, many productions lose money. But the idea is, does it go to one of these three? If it hits all three, hey, great. That is a winning project. That's the one I want to do. There are projects like that in the year. There'll be one or two or three like that hit all three. But most of the time, if it hits even one of those buckets, I'm happy to do it. Even if we're going to make a loss on the project, but in the long run, it will do something for us.
And also the thing is, we don't operate off of a traditional, working model, right? So ticket sales ultimately, globally, they're never, except for countries like France, they're never the kind of the primary revenue stream for a cinema, right? Concessions and so on. But that model also doesn't apply to the way that we do things, because supersized popcorn and all of that, which is usually the way cinemas make money, doesn't translate in the same way that it does here. So that's why you also have to think about, okay, what are the exceptions? How do you modify the model? For your...
Correct. How do you adapt?
For your model.
You
can have that giant Coke bottle with chai inside. Just suggestions.
Working on it. That's a great business development.
You can come to me for more
initiative. I will. I'll sign up. I'm subscribing right now.
I have 15 more questions, but we don't have the time for it. So I think this has been very insightful. I hope this will be helpful for future founders. And I'm sure we need a part 2. Let's start wrapping up. Last time, no one respected my time limit. This time, 60 seconds for 2 final rapid fire questions. What would you like your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
Radio silence.
Yeah. 60 seconds to think.
60. Extra points if you start first.
I think we'd like to be the pioneer in Indian art form in Dubai and make Dubai the cultural capital like Chennai is.
We'd like to build a legacy of exporting our stories rather than importing our stories. So we want to be storytellers for the world, stories that come out of the UAE in the form of theatre storytelling, and take them to various parts of the world and to be a net exporter of talent. So the legacy would be to leave an indelible mark on the performing arts scene.
I think if there's anything I would like us to be known for, it's that doing things, the alternative and the independent and the parallel is viable and it works, and this is across the board, whether it's as a business model, whether it's as individuals, whether it's as a career path. If our legacy is to show that in terms of significance and in terms of contribution, in terms of viability, commercial viability, independent parallel paths, the paths of most resistance, can actually be something worth betting on and fighting for. And I think that part, and doing things differently. So we've been doing that, and we've been doing it thankfully and successfully. I think that would be something I would like to really crystallize in the next chapter.
There's a poem called Ode by Arthur Shaughnessy. I don't know if you guys know, but it's talking about the three of you. The verse from the poem goes, "We are the music makers and we are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers and sitting by desolate streams. World losers and world forsakers, on whom the pale moon gleams. Yet we are the movers and shakers of the world forever, it seems." You guys have been the movers and shakers, the dreamers, the music makers in Dubai, definitely in the Mount Rushmore. So I think Dubai is lucky to have the three of you, and I'm sure there's a lot more to come. I'm excited to see what's going to come. Final question. What is the meaning of life?
You always end with this, don't you? What is the meaning of life?
So you're prepared, so you have the answer.
Still discovering, still on the journey of finding out. I think happiness for me is meaning of life. Do something you're passionate about. Do something that makes you happy.
Thinking. I'm thinking.
Oh, thinking of the answer.
I thought thinking is the
is
meaning of
also
life. It's a great meaning of life.
It could be. It could be.
I mean, look, existential crisis activated, so that's something that we're constantly trying to grapple with. But I think simply circling back to the opening conversation of stories, I think stories are the thing of life itself, the stuff of life itself. So that is a big part of it.
Okay, I think discovery. Every step of the way, there's so much of discovery and there's so much to learn. The moment you stop learning, I feel you stop living. Because you live for a very short period of time, and that's all the time you have to think and understand and absorb the world around you from your perspective.
If people wish to connect with all three of you or get involved at the Junction, Spanda, or Cinema Akil, how do they find you guys? How do they find you?
For us, Instagram at the moment, Junction Dubai. Best way to get in touch with us. Or just walk on through the doors.
Spanda's everywhere. It's on Instagram, it's on YouTube, it has a website, and our people will vouch for you. You can just ask any Indian who learns Bharatanatyam and they'll know Spanda. We
have an Instagram account, Cinema Akil, Akil, and we have a lot of folks that work in the space that walk through the doors. As Gautam said, that's the best way to really find out. The space speaks for itself and has its own story. And of course, we do have a WhatsApp number and a phone number. You can pick up the phone and call us if you're old school like that. And on LinkedIn, soon on TikTok as well.
A lot of ways to find all of you. I really hope more and more people walk through these spaces. I think they really make Dubai such a great place to be. Gautam, Puja, Butheina, thank you so much. It's been a privilege for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
finding
us.
Thank you.
It's interesting.